tell us a little bit about your background and what you teach.
I'm Nicholas Ferroni. I am a high school history, cultural studies, and history through pop culture and mass media teacher. And yes, they're all a lot of fun to teach. In Union, New Jersey, I teach 10th grade and 11th and 12th grade. And it's my 17th year now. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. This year, I think I'm a first-year teacher like every teacher because it's a new experience. But I'm happy to join you. So thank you for having me.
So great to have you. And we had, you guys are in for a treat tonight. We had some great stories that Nick was telling me before we even got on board. And the big question tonight is, what is going back to school looking like for you? I know we've talked about some of you going back hybrid, some of you going back face-to-face, completely remote. Nick, tell us, how is your district going back?
I mean, and again, my district in particular, I think districts from all the country are doing the best they can with the resources they have and the information they have. It's tough to plan for tomorrow when you don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. It's like you can only plan and then adjust the time being. But our district is looking to do hybrid, which 4 days in school, 1 day virtual. I think that may change over the next week or so, depending on what our Governor Murphy says and what our school district feels. I mean, I do have to say, my district and the administration, we always err on the side of safety. Kids first, like teachers first. It's health first. Like no, I mean, I love working for them because nobody's expendable. They're not willing to take that risk, which I'm sorry to say, I think some districts are willing to risk the lives of certain people. And again, like I completely empathize with parents. I do, and it's one of those things where I want to be back in school. I miss those connections. I mean, I'd rather see my students and have those moments. Virtual teaching for me was an adjustment, and I felt like it was so impersonal in so many cases. And it's just one of those things where I want to go back to school, and I think most teachers too, but only if we can not guarantee safety, but you never guarantee a child's safety, but do everything we can to ensure that people feel safe. Because if you don't feel safe, I don't think a child is going to be willing to learn in that environment.
Right. And I think you bring up a really valid point of how teachers are feeling, especially, we were all thrown into this in March. Didn't really, and I come from 5 years of, virtual hybrid teaching anyways, but I understand like being thrown into that is not the ideal place you want to be as a teacher. And, we're going to spend some time about how to basically maximize being in any situation, how to maximize basically your resources and how to go, hashtag back to school strong. There's ways to do that no matter what way you're going back. And I love how we were talking about when we were full virtual in March. We do this as a standard in virtual learning. We call home a lot. So tell me, what were you doing during March, April, and May, June? That was a lot different than what you normally would have done, and what was great about it?
I mean, I'll be honest, content became secondary to me. It was more or less making sure that my students felt safe, they felt comforted, their families felt comforted. And I used a lot of great resources. I mean, I was recording videos all the time, I was live streaming, I was using Google Hangout. But I still say the most effective thing I did on a weekly basis was to call home to the families and parents and guardians of every student. Not to talk about class or anything else, but just to see how they were doing. I was doing my best to maintain those relationships and just let them know that I'm there for them. And again, academics are important, but it's like anything else in life. If you don't meet Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Bloom's taxonomy is irrelevant and it won't matter. So, I mean, I spent hours every week on the phone, just calling home, talking to my students, FaceTiming. Some of them were babysitting during the day, so I would FaceTime and Google Hangout with them in the evening. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And whenever I do press, I always joke around. I'm like, I didn't think it was possible for teachers to work harder or to give more hours, but we did during virtual and remote teaching.
I love that you said the Maslow before Bloom's. I think that was like a hashtag during March it was. And that's so true. We have to meet the needs we have to make our students feel safe before we can expect them to learn content.
But that's just a human basic need. None of us would thrive in any environment if we feel unsafe or hungry or our physical needs are not met.
Absolutely.
I mean, but we, for some reason, apply the opposite to schools, where if you're a good teacher, you can get a kid to worry about school or care about school if they're hungry, depressed, suicidal, or have anxiety, which to me is the most absurd thing in many cases.
It's hard. And, I've talked about this a couple times, and I'd love to hear your view on this. Going back to school and being able to, virtually teaching skills. So we as teachers teach content and we teach skills. I mean, we teach two they don't have to be separate. We usually teach them together. But did you find yourself concentrating a little bit more on skills, or because you let go of the content a little bit?
I definitely, and I think the common rule for most of us was cut the work in half, cut the assignments in half, the workload. And I definitely focused more, I would say, on skills and creativity. If I knew my students, again, I had students who only had access to a phone. So for certain reviews, I let students answer questions using TikTok or creating a video or doing things like that. I utilized social media a lot because so I would ask questions in a TikTok format, and they would then duet that and answer the questions. And it was so useful. And again, my 5 students who were on TikTok all day, I'm like, they had no excuse and they thrived. Other students like to write. Other students like to record their vlogs or do things. So I tried to, the one thing I worried about most was their social skills and their interaction. So I tried to provide them with resources and I would say assessments that would help strengthen those skills. So, I mean, I do think even though they were isolated, the socialization I tried to focus on, the interaction. So I did everything I could to keep them engaged, but also kind of make sure we sharpen those skills that they may be missing if they're not sitting with their friends talking or interacting with people on a regular basis.
Can you give some tips and tricks that, especially because, you teach high school, but this can totally work for elementary. How did you get them to collaborate in a virtual environment?
I let them work in groups a lot, so a lot of them already established groups prior.
Right.
And when it comes to presentations, virtual presentations, they would kind of rotate. So a lot of my students already had a set of students or a group of students that they tend to work with and they collaborate with anyway. They did they did create Google Hangouts. Obviously, when you use certain things like Google Slides and things along those lines, it's easier for collaboration. There's a lot of apps that provide that. But some students thrive better working independently, so I allowed them to do that. But a lot of students, either they created TikToks together, or they created videos together, or, some of my students who were neighbors who would hang out would record their videos together and do things along those lines, where it still allowed somewhat interaction. To me, it was all about, I did not care how they delivered the information. I wanted it to do something that I thought would help them. And even in an indirect way, like making a TikTok. My students still have to know the information to record the answers, duetting me with the TikTok. And they were incredible, and they were so creative. And I got what I wanted. They used TikTok to make their video. It was a win-win. So, and I'll be honest, I tried so many things. I tried to convert games we played in the classroom to virtually. Some worked, some didn't. It was definitely a trial and error, a few months of trial and error for me. And we had fun when things bombed. It's like, I would ask them, like, how did you like that? Like, it wasn't as good as in class. I'm like, okay, we won't do it anymore. It's
right.
So I always ask my students feedback because I want them to enjoy it as well as, utilize the skill set that we're trying to enhance.
No, I think you're right. I think part of virtual learning, just like our first year of learning or teaching, is that you're going to bomb. I think that's one of the things you learn as a first year.
You have to take risks. Like,
right.
You have to bomb. If you're not bombing or messing up, you're not trying.
Yeah. And are you teaching? Like, are you actually teaching? So, and I remember my first year of even going virtual, I was like, this is a brand new game for me, especially, only being 2 years into my teaching career. And you know what? Kids are kids at the end of the day, right? Like, they still want you to engage with them. And TikTok I can't believe you got them to do TikToks. That's so much fun.
Well, it wasn't mandatory because, again, it's not approved by the school district. But if I didn't let certain students use it, I wouldn't have gotten work from them. But the work they turned in probably took more work than if they actually did it the traditional way of just writing it down. But because they feel comfortable with it, and again, like, I had the luxury of teaching high school where I had those interactions. My heart goes out to elementary school teachers. I think I had to try to be engaging online virtually with my students, which is tough to do. But what I saw elementary school teachers do, from dressing up costumes to just providing so much content that was so inspiring and so creative, and just, it gave me hope. It also reminded me too, Sam, that I can never teach elementary school.
Oh, right. Like we laugh because in class time, we have a bunch of elementary school teachers on board, and I'm like, oh no, there's no way I could teach elementary. I have so much respect for elementary school teachers, but you talked about, dressing up in costume and elementary school teachers doing that. And I want to give everyone a background. You're an actor. So how do you bring that to your class?
So before teaching, I did act. It wasn't by choice. I just kind of fell into it. So I was on a soap, and it was an interesting experience. But I will say this with absolute certainty: a good teacher can be an amazing actor and probably win an Oscar. But an amazing actor will not always necessarily be a good teacher. And we all know as educators, I went from putting on 1 show a day to 6 shows a day to an audience that does not want to be there. And it's like, you can't fake passion. It's, I think, our job. Every good educator is a performer. You know, you have to be. And I hate to say it, it's good teachers can make boring subjects seem extremely fascinating, and bad teachers can make the most fascinating subjects seem extremely boring. So it works both ways.
Definitely. And, you know, you said something before we got on live about, you know, good teachers have to be performers, and that is so true. We are on when we walk into a classroom, and I think passion shows. I mean, students love teachers with passion. I've never seen a teacher walk in with a bunch of passion and kids not love them. Like, it's just part of what we do.
Passionate people make other people passionate. It's just how it is.
Definitely. So we've talked a lot about going back virtually, and you said you're going to go back a little bit hybrid. Is that correct?
Yes. As of now, again, it's day to day. Yeah.
How are you planning to, I mean, because some of the mandates are kind of hard, keeping everyone 6 feet apart, facial coverings. I don't know what your state is like, but mine is requiring facial coverings if you're not 6 feet apart within the class. How are you as a teacher going to help, you know, that's even a skill, getting students to do that? How do you intend to do that in your classroom?
And as a high school teacher, again, in middle school, it's like we could have those conversations with students, let them know, you know, be open with them and be candid, and let them know that this is how it has to be. It's uncomfortable, but we have to do this, and this is for everybody. It's not just for you or me. It's not a dress code thing. It's for your families, our friends. It's just one of those things where I feel like and again, like being a high school teacher, I get to have those conversations which are easier for them to digest. I just think, and not to praise elementary school teachers again, but one of the greatest gifts I think elementary school teachers have is making scary moments digestible and comforting to kids, or comforting kids in scary moments. And I saw, I was watching a few different Instagram pages of art teachers in elementary school. One of my friends, Cassie Stevens, had her students made all the masks and had them put their own personal designs on their masks, and with smiley, and it was so fun, and I laughed when I saw it. But I'm like, that's how you get kids to engage in something that may be scary but have fun with it and ease their anxiety. Because kids are very anxious and curious, and they'll ask 100 questions about stuff, and sometimes the answers aren't what they always want to hear. But it's like teachers, and elementary school teachers in particular, always find amazing ways to kind of take these moments that are so complex and overwhelming for adults, and get a child to kind of understand it without scaring them or without overwhelming them. I mean, I'm going to do everything I can to be open and honest with my students and let them know that this is, again, this is something, it's historical. We've been down this road before. We got through it before. It's not a matter of oppression. If this is oppression for you, then we've had it pretty good. This is not oppression. It's a matter of the greater good. And to me, it's my logic. If either worst case scenario, if it's not as effective as people think, I'll tell you, it's like worst case scenario, it's still going to help. Right. We do things that, you wear your seatbelt every day. You don't need it every day. You only need it when you're in a car accident, but you wear it every day.
And you're glad when you have it on.
Yeah, you're glad when you have it on, just in case. Yep. And it's like you can't. These are the moments where you have to have those hard conversations with kids and let them know that it's a big moment. This is something, again, as history teachers, we'll be teaching about.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I can't wait to teach about the toilet paper shortage of 2020. that one. Wait, so Mr. Ferroni, there was food? Yeah, there was food everywhere, but there was no toilet paper. No toilet paper.
And it was the worst.
Yeah. You made it through.
But we made it through. And, I've seen this resurgence of teaching outside. I don't know if you've read anything on it. And I had someone in the comments talk about doing Zoom group meetings in the park when they were going virtual. But when you're, face to face, have you considered maybe bringing your students outside in a time that you normally wouldn't have?
I have, but in the Northeast, that's only good till October.
True story.
Yeah, it's true. It's only good till October, and it makes perfect sense. Create a tent, almost like an outdoor picnic area, and I guess in certain areas in the South you can do that longer.
Probably through the winter, to be honest.
Yeah. So but for us, it's that's only good till October unless we get heating lamps and everything else. Right. There's so many adjustments. And again, I would not mind doing that. I'd prefer to do that. At the same time, now we bring up the question of technology. Right. So now it's how am I going to engage or use all the technology that our school invested in, whether it's the Wi-Fi, the smart boards, or anything like that. It's it's really, everybody wants answers, but there's nobody that could really give answers, or there's no real solution or one solution to this event.
Well, and I think that you're bringing up the point where teachers, they've really started, they want easy answers, and like, what platform do I use? What thing do I use? And there's so many,
Yeah.
it's like overwhelming.
It's overwhelming.
And I think that's like really why we started this series, because even as a virtual teacher, when I first started, I started, 5 years ago, and it's actually a hybrid class. I had a full computer lab and taught traditionally. You're looking at everything that exists out there. I mean, you have Google Classroom, and then Padlet, and then Nearby, and then you start stacking all of these things, and you have to learn all of them, and you have to put your students on all of them.
You have to make sure they know all of them, and I prefer simplicity. I mean, to me, it's funny. I gave a virtual keynote a month back, and I started off like, okay, guys, these are the 50 apps that I'm going to teach you how to use by the end of this keynote, and I showed a picture of like 50 apps, and the next slide was like, I'm only kidding. Like, it's like, so everybody's
okay.
Yeah, I'm only kidding. And it's just one of those things where it's like, to me, what do you know best? What do the kids function with best? To me, it's so much better to focus on one or two apps or sources or sites than it is to focus on 25. If it's overwhelming for you, then imagine what it's going to be like for your students who may not be as familiar with those. So to me, it's like pick 1, 2, or 3 and kind of make yourself a master of those. That's it.
Right. And tip to those elementary school teachers, because you guys aren't teaching your elementary students, you're teaching the parents, which is sometimes harder than teaching the students. Do yourself a favor. Most things, how to use a platform, is on YouTube. There's so many how-to videos out there. Just link it in class tag for your parents, so you don't have to go through the same instructions 900 times. I had to learn that one.
The advice I always give to parents, because when they ask me on like Today Show, like, what advice would you give to parents who now have to, again, like my mom used to tutor me all the time, and we are in this together. Like, I understand parents are picking up a lot at the same time. It's like we're doing a lot, but it's also, we do need assistance. Like, we are in this together. There's no separation. But the one thing I always tell parents, especially even parents of younger children, is it was brilliant. It was brilliant at the time. I thought it was kind of just fun, where she played a game where it's like, teach me what you have to know. So instead of like her teaching me math, I would have to teach her how to do the assignment. So it's kind of like, I always say that, have your kids teach you what they need to know, because studies show, first of all, we retain 90% of what we teach. And I think a child would enjoy nothing more than teaching their parent how to spell or how to do this and how to do that. And it's like, and they're indirectly learning it. So, I mean, to take the stress off parents, let your kid be the teacher, but you be the student, and say, all right, you need to teach mommy or daddy how to do this. This is it. How do we spell this? Are you sure? And it's like, and that's it. And it's like, give them the power, give them the role. So many kids would eat that up.
And we did have a couple comments in chat, by the way. They love the idea about coloring your mask. That was like very well received. And we just have a couple platforms questions that I'm going to answer real quick. Deanna, feel free to ask any questions you have about ClassTag. And then the difference between Seesaw and ClassTag. ClassTag is a parent-teacher engagement app. That's what we are at the end of the day. We keep parents in the loop and make it easy for you to talk with parents. And I even want to expand on that, because we talked about that before we went live, Nick. We talk to parents now more in a virtual atmosphere, or even now and more now than ever in general. How do you feel about that? Is that working in your benefit? Tell us a little bit more about that.
I mean, talking to parents on a regular basis, first of all, they appreciate it so much, because for the most part, I just let them vent to me, and just because parents are anxious too. And it was me just talking to them and hearing how they're doing. And also too, it was a lot of students, when I had students not show up, it's like, I'd call home and find out their mom's a nurse, or they're watching their siblings, or their grandfather's sick, or God forbid they lost somebody due to COVID. So there were so many things that I found out that, if a kid didn't turn work for 3 weeks, I'm not going to just fail them. I'm going to find out what was the reason behind it. And there's always a reason. So it made it so much more personal. I know the parents appreciate it so much, and we're so thankful, because it reinforced the fact that I'm not just kind of, here's the work, good luck. It's like, we care. We care. Next to you, we care about your children a lot. And that's why we care deeply. That's why when a teacher says my kids, they always have to specify whether it's their kids or their students, their actual biological kids or their students. Okay. How many professions refer to other people's kids as my kids? So I would just say, calling home and keeping that interaction, that connection, it takes time, but it's so worth it and so appreciated. And that way the That way, the first time you do talk to a parent, it's not confrontational because, well, my kid didn't turn work for 3 weeks. I always call home for good things.
Right.
And it's those conversations are better and they're funnier because the minute they hear the teachers on the phone, their heart stops, and then they realize it's for something good and they're almost shocked. So to me, it's like, it's not, I don't call them for negative things. And it's like during quarantine and once we went into the virtual aspect of it, I called home once a week to every child, and it took probably 2 hours a day. But it was probably the most effective thing I could do just because I actually had a chance to engage with everybody.
Right. And for, summing up that's great, is that even in my virtual life, I told you before we got on that I called home once every 2 weeks for every student. I had 160 kids, and I'm sure I call home. And it does really help the relationship between you and the student, but also reinforce, hey, your parent is really here. They're here to help you. And, you make a good point. I'm a parent. I was freaking out a little bit more. I was freaking out more for my daughter than I was for, teaching. I'm like, virtual teaching, I got this. But I'm like, oh, wait, now I have to make sure my daughter's okay while she's virtually learning. So it's hectic. And for those of you who are asking questions about Class Tech, I will be more than happy once we get off this chat. I'll drop you some resources. I think that will help you out for Deanna and Dorinda. So any parting words, Nick, for the school year?
Just to everyone out there, parents and the educators, it's thank you so much. This is uncharted waters for all of us. I mean, if for some reason you feel like your child's teacher isn't I don't want to say going above and beyond, but isn't doing what you feel you need, like reach out. Parents, reach out to your child's teacher. I promise you they're equally as overwhelmed, and they may not know there's an issue or concern, or if there's any other resources. I mean, again, if your child needs additional resources, contact the teacher. We go above and beyond. Like, we will always do everything we can to help your child succeed because we want to see them succeed and we want to see them be happy. So I think parents and teachers, now is the time, and not to play politics, but for some reason we always get thrown against each other, parents against teachers, when it's not. We both want to see your child happy and successful. So I feel like now is the time to keep those relationships and honestly make them stronger and stay more connected.
Great. Thank you. That's perfect. That's a perfect way. I'm not even going to expand upon that. That's a perfect way to end the live session. Guys, have a great night. If you think of any questions, feel free to drop them in chat. We do respond to them at least 12 hours, 24 hours afterwards. So we will make sure we get back to you if we didn't get to answer your question. And have a great evening and happy week for anyone who went back to school.
Whatever day it is right now.
Yeah, whatever day it is.
Whatever day.
Bye, guys.